Hey guys, today we are going to talk about Introduction to Fantasy. Our next genre that we're going to be reading is fantasy. So let's just talk about a few things we might need to know first. First of all, in fantasy fiction, the elements may not be realistic. They're often not realistic. You're going to have talking animals, magical powers. Oftentimes it's set in a medieval universe or it involves mythical beings. So we're going to go over a few of these mythical beings. The first one is the boogeyman. The boogeyman can take many different shapes or sizes, what he looks like, but the purpose of the boogeyman is always the same, to try to scare kids and try to make them be good. So a lot of parents would say the boogeyman was hiding under their beds or whatever a long time ago to try to make the kids stay in bed. Sometimes it looks like an actual human, but sometimes it takes a more supernatural form. The next one we're going to talk about, boogeyman, is the vampire. You guys probably know a little bit about vampires. Vampires typically, of course, they avoid sunlight. They feed on people who are living. That's how they drink their blood. And their hearts are vulnerable to sharp objects. So you want to pierce them in the heart with a stake to be able to kill them. It's kind of hard to kill a vampire. All right, and vampires, they're immortal. They can live forever and ever and ever and ever as long as they continue to eat, drink the blood of people. All right, next is the dieback. The Dybbuk is from the Jewish culture, and the Jewish actually have quite a few kind of scary creatures. This guy is the dislocated soul of someone who has died. So, in other words, it's a soul that they've died, but they take over a host body because they haven't finished their unfinished business. So, in other words, like say they want to get revenge on someone. So their soul takes over somebody else's body. All right. The next one is a banshee. A banshee is a female spirit whose haunting howls herald a coming death. In other words, if you hear the banshee screaming, that means you're going to die soon. And they're part of Irish mythology. And yeah, sometimes you might hear she scream. You hear her screaming like a banshee. That's where that's coming from. Okay, the Pontianak is a evil spirit from Indonesia or Malaysia. Looks kind of scary, huh? The Pontianak is said to be the souls of women who died when they were pregnant, and they usually have pale skin, long, lank hair, and a white dress. And they are that one of the things that they're said to do is to try to um, lure away, get men to come towards them and then kill them. Zombies. Y'all probably know a lot about zombies. They're actually from Haiti. Um, and typically, they, are people who have died, basically, but their brains, for some reason, their brain is disconnected from their body. And so they like to shamble along. You know how they walk kind of weird, and their only desire is to eat. This paper says consume human flesh, but actually, really, what they want to eat is brains. This guy's a hydra. Hydras are a little icky. Um, Usually, if you cut off one of their heads, two more will come in their place. And they're many-headed beasts, and they're protectors usually. A lot of the times, they might protect a treasure or something. Um, the chimera is usually part lion, part goat, and part snake. Basically, probably somebody at some point saw those three animals kind of close by each other and decided that it was a chimera. But really, any beast that has more than one um, type of animal connected to it is now known as a chimera. The Yeti, the Sasquatch, and Bigfoot kind of all got lumped just a little bit together in this one. So we've seen people always say that they've seen sightings and have pictures. For a long time, where I lived before in Paris, Arkansas, somebody put like a big poster that looked like one up in the woods, and people saw it and they thought it was an actual Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The Yeti is typically in the Arctic. It's in the snow. Um, so a lot of people really believe in the Yeti, the Sasquatch, and Bigfoot. I'm not here to argue with you whether they exist or not. I'm just telling you they are also clumped in with as fantastical mythical beings. A dragon. So, as far as we know, dragons have never really existed, but yet we get tales of dragons from all over the world way before everyone was able to communicate with each other. Typically, they're used as part of royal power. Royalty often have some connection to dinosaurs. Of course, you also have the Knights of the Round Table that I talked about before, where they would slay the dragons who were terrorizing the town since they breathe fire. You guys know this guy, girl, guy, I don't know. A unicorn. Everybody knows a little bit about a unicorn. The horses with the beautiful single corn uni. Um, so now you see unicorns everywhere for all kinds of things, but certainly they've been around for a long time. And really, you're never supposed to ride a unicorn. That's like a big no no. They don't allow themselves to be ridden. The next one is a basilisk. It says, what's scarier than a snake? One that's a snake with a rooster and can kill people with a single stare. So just by looking at you, it scares you. Maybe that's why I'm so scared of snakes. Certain myths also say that these basilisks can turn silver into gold. I don't know much about that, but yeah, so it's called a basilisk. So a phoenix is that mythical bird that dies and then rises from the ashes. Um, it's kind of part of the universal story of resurrection, coming back to life. And sometimes can represent like someone's spirit coming back to life or their actual literal return from the dead, from the grave. It's said to stem from Greek and Roman mythology, where you hear about it. This is a griffin. He has the body of a lion and the head, wings, and front feet of an eagle. Um, they seem like you should be able to, ride them, but they're very temperamental. They're very grouchy and grumpy, and they're really good at guarding gold, like their dragon cousins. You guys know what a wizard is. A wizard is a very powerful being, usually portrayed as a man, but sometimes as a woman who has phenomenal magic powers. Oh, our lovely Loch Ness monster, also known as Nessie. So the Loch Ness monster, Loch means lake in Scotland, and so they say that they see this Loch Ness monster. Lots of people have taken pictures of it, but they've spent a lot of money doing searching that lake and have never found any actual evidence of the Loch Ness monster. And a werewolf. So werewolves, or like lycanthropes, if you want to know their real name, are kind of sort of like witches. Um, Men were commonly hunted and executed, killed, in the belief that they transformed in the middle of the night into these creatures that ate everything called werewolves. And so, of course, they howled at the moon, and during the day, they just looked like normal people. But when the moon was out, they turned into wolves who killed everything, and they were so vicious, much more vicious than a normal wolf. So satyrs and fawns, kind of in the same thing, they have the bottom half of a goat and the top half of a person, a human. But you can see they also have the horns. Um, Typically, they look a lot alike. Fawns a lot of times sit by the fire with a lovely cup of cocoa, And satyrs are much more adventurous, running around doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Um, you might have heard of, especially like the fawn, and if you've ever seen or read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. All right, so a centaur is the top half of a human and the full body of a horse. So they've been in Greek mythology a lot. They're often the antagonist, the villain, and they fall victim to classical heroes like Heracles and Theseus. So yeah, they're usually seen as not the good guys. I just popped up the Minotaur. He has the head of a bull and the body of a man, and they're always angry and scary. If you read Percy Jackson, you might have seen a Minotaur in that one. This one is hard for me to pronounce, but Acrobumele, and it is a scorpion and a man, and they're from ancient Mesopotamia, and they're known for guarding the gates of the sun god. They're kind of like a desert centaur, but they can sting you with their tail, so a little bit more vicious. You guys know about lovely, lovely mermaids, but in mythology and in fantasy tales, mermaids are not typically like Ariel. They don't want to be where the people are, and they don't want to see them dancing. They actually uh, typically are kind of connected to the Greek sirens. Um, so basically, what they are is the sirens. They lured men to their deaths with their songs. The men would come wanting to closer and closer, wanting to hear the beautiful songs, and end up crashing on the rocks. Typically, mermaids are much more like the mermaids that are shown in the original animated Peter Pan, where they're not very nice. They're unkind and they're not nice at all. Um, they think that maybe uh, sailors invented them because they might have seen like well, some people even say that manatees um, that's what they were actually seeing, but they were hungry and thirsty, and they would see things and they would think it was a beautiful mermaid under the sea. The gorgon, maybe you've heard of Medusa. She has her hair is snakes. And if she sees you, if you look at her, then she'll turn you to stone. So she was originally a beautiful maiden, and the goddess Athena was angry at her because she was so beautiful. So she turned her lovely hair and gorgeous face into snakes. And as soon as people looked at her, she turned them into stone. So this is a nymph. Actually, this is a nymph. Nymphs are women, and typically they were supernatural, magical, just, kind of um, far away. And that kind of goes together with the fairies and also the sprites. Some of them can be kind of mean, malicious, but most of them are sort of nice, and they protected nature, whether they lived in the water like a nymph or in the woodlands like the fairies. The next one we're going to talk about is a goblin. Ugh, gross. Goblins are typically greedy. They want what everybody else has. They have a very short temper. They get angry easily, and they get into mischief. They cause trouble all the time. They're typically a lot uglier than their little cousins, the fairies. Okay, so this guy right here is actually a gnome. You might have seen a garden gnome before in someone's yard, but gnomes are actually they live in walls and underground. And a lot of times, house gnomes did the day's work at night so the citizens could just lay around and take naps all day. So, a lot of times that they would do the work of the people who lived in the town. So, I wanted to pick this picture of a leprechaun because um, this is not the typical leprechaun that you would think of. Sure, those show up in some stories, but this is not Lucky Charms, right? Leprechauns are Irish sprites who could grant 3 wishes to anyone who could catch them. They were small and they were really, really fast, and they had a real talent for mending people's shoes. So sometimes they could go into people's houses at night and mend their shoes. There's an ogre. That's not Shrek. Ogres are huge, monstrous creatures with an appetite for human flesh, especially children's flesh. They've shown up in a lot of different fairy tales, including the Odyssey and Beowulf. There's even one in the story Puss in Boots, which you guys have seen with Shrek. So if you see Shrek, you know the ogres. Um, it's in Shrek that you would think the ogres are, kind of gentle on the inside with lots of emotions. But no, in the real fantasy, ogres were not like that. They were just icky. So a cyclops is just like an ogre. Huge, huge, huge giants, but they only had one eye. So a cyclops were typically not good characters to have around. They were scary. In the Odyssey, Odysseus tells about a giant whose name is Nobody who blinds him with a sharpened stick. And that confuses all the other Cyclops. The Oni, this guy looks just truly terrifying. He's a red-faced monster. You might have seen the red-faced monster emoji like on an iPad or a phone. But that's the Oni. He was a giant ogre-like monster from Japanese mythology. They eat men, and they're often depicted carrying those heavy iron clubs. And during the Japanese Spring Festival, you can see people putting out dried beans, and they toss them around to ward off the Oni. Okay, the golem is actually another character from Jewish folklore. They have these little statues that are the golems, and they're like a magical robot who protect or terrorize people, depending on who you ask. So, because the golems can rise up from this little 2 or 3 inch tall statue to huge and bigger than men, and they protect the Jewish people. So, now that we've gotten through some of the different types of characters, fantasy novels can be romantic or historical or have lots of action, or they can kind of be a mix of the three. Fairy tales, myths, and legends can all be fantasy. The key element in all of these, though, is magic. So, other key character features are supernatural characters like elves, dragons, dwarves, enchanted plants, that can talk, or the plant might be able to wrap you up and pull you in, and talking animals, and usually some humans that are not very important to the story. They may be huge, the protagonist, like I'm thinking in The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, but they're generally not considered to be super important. Everyone else, all the other supernatural creatures, think that they're better than the humans. A lot of times they have love, sometimes romantic love, like they fall in love. But usually it's just more about something to make the reader fall in love with the protagonist, the main character. So this is the fawn from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that is Lucy. And so, they have a strong bond or love, a reason that we really fall in love with the character. Of course, if you have a protagonist, the hero, you also have to have a villain, an antagonist, because every good story has a bad guy. Sometimes the bad guy is not very easily defeated. Sometimes can't even figure out who the villain is until closer to the end of the book. Like in the Harry Potter series, it takes us a while to find all of the villains and who's the good guys and who are the bad guys. And sometimes there's just a really great battle, and it has to be fought in order for us to kind of find out more about the story for it to come to its conclusion. Typically, there's a special weapon that has special characteristics, like Harry Potter's wand, or Aragorn's sword, or how Percy Jackson can manipulate water. The setting is often so important. It's actually another character in the story a lot of times, like in Narnia or Middle Earth, Hogwarts or Mount Olympus. And I'm thinking Mount Olympus particularly with Percy Jackson, but in all kinds of myths. They act as a character in the story. Where the setting is a huge part of the story. And the language can heighten the reader's, ability to get lost in the magical world. So, like, Tolkien used Elvish, and it was a manipulation, or sometimes another manipulation of existing language. You can see that that's what those letters all stand for. And so, I even have a daughter that was for a long time could write in Elfish because she practiced it because she loved Tolkien's books so very much. So that's it, guys. That's all I got for you. That's our introduction to fantasy, and we'll start tomorrow reading our new book.